It is absolutely incredible how many sailings Royal Caribbean is doing in Alaska this season. And we have figured out which ones are the absolute best. Let's go. Hey, welcome to This is the Cruise. I'm Clint, and this is the channel where we look at upcoming cruise itineraries and try to figure out if this is the cruise for you. Today, we're looking at the absolute best Alaskan cruises Today, we're looking at the absolute best cruises on Royal Caribbean to Alaska in 2024. Over the last 4 videos, we looked at 4 different ships sailing 23 distinct itineraries 84 times. And we've narrowed those 84 sailings down to the top 4, with a couple of honorable mentions, and one that technically is in the top 5, but I gotta give it a eh. And so now we're going to pick the single best Alaskan itinerary on Royal Caribbean this 2024 season. Before we dig in, I really appreciate it if you like the video and subscribe to the channel. It really helps me out a lot. And if I've helped you out at all, I'd really appreciate it if you buy me a cup of coffee. You can use the secure link in the description below. Again, it really helps me out, keeps these videos coming. Thanks a lot. So quick recap, in part 1, we looked at Brilliance of the Seas Alaskan sailings. In part 2, we looked at Quantum of the Seas. In part 3, we looked at Radiance of the Seas. And in part 4, my last video, we looked at Ovation of the Seas, all 2024 Alaskan sailings. Check out those videos if you haven't already. I give you some best of for each of the ships, as well as definitely some itineraries to avoid if you can help it, if the dates are flexible enough. There are some in there where I'm like, yeah, I probably wouldn't sail on that one if I could help it. There's better options. So in this video, let's look at the winners. And what's interesting is number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4 are not the best for each ship. In some cases, one of the ships barely squeaks by. So let's jump in. Okay, number 5, Alaska's Inside Passage on Brilliance of the Seas. This one's round trip from Vancouver. It cruises the Inside Passage, stops in Sitka, then visits Tracy Arm Fjord, goes to Juneau, Skagway, Ketchikan, then cruises the Inside Passage coming back. It's a well-rounded itinerary. You get a glacier with Tracy Arm Fjord, as well as being able to cruise the peaceful and wonderful Inside Passage. I do definitely recommend this itinerary. It's wonderful. It's on a smaller ship, so you're not riding roller coasters and doing all of that while you're visiting Alaska, which is nice. And you have a good selection of kind of traditional Alaskan cruise stops. This one sails June 23rd or July 21st. And at the time that I researched this, the July 21st sailing was actually a little bit better value. This one gets a Clint's cruisability score overall of 20.71 and was ranked of all 23 itineraries at number 7. All right, let's move on to number 4. This is the Alaska Experience on Ovation of the Seas. And I gotta give this one an avoid. And the reason is because the only sailing is September 27th. If the price is spectacular, go for it. But understand a couple things. 1, you don't cruise Inside Passage. You have a couple days at sea on this one, and there are no actual glaciers on this itinerary. This one leaves from Seattle. It's round trip. You spend a day cruising, like I mentioned, and then you go to Juneau, Skagway, Sitka, all very nice stops. You spend a day cruising back south, and then you visit Victoria, Canada, and you have to do that because of the Jones Act. It's just the reality of it. Victoria is a fine stop if you have enough time to spend there. A lot of times though, sailing back, the timing can get off and that Victoria stop may be cut short. The ship will stop in Victoria, but there may not be much time to do things. And then you cruise back to Seattle. This one was ranked number 6th overall because of the strength of those stops, but notice again, there are no glaciers and it sails late in the season and it gets a Clint's cruisability score of 22.25. Definitely better than, really honestly, it's in the upper quarter of these itineraries, but that date, just can't get around that date. So let's move on. All right, number 3 is the Alaska Adventure on Quantum of the Seas. You have an interesting, very late departure out of Vancouver. So you board during the day and then the ship doesn't leave until like 3 o'clock in the morning, the next morning, which is interesting. Not quite sure how they're doing that. This one is going to visit Ketchikan, Sitka, Endicott Arm and Dawes Glacier, and Juneau. So those are some really nice stops. Then you spend a day cruising. Now remember, we left from Vancouver and they still stop at Victoria, which is unfortunate because you're booking an Alaskan adventure cruise, but we're stopping in Canada and we started in Canada. We know for a fact they don't have to do that, so I'm not really sure why they're stopping in Victoria, but they are. And then we end up in Seattle. Technically, that makes this cruise a one-way cruise, which means you get to experience both your origination port of Vancouver as well as your destination, final destination port of Seattle. That definitely helps out the score. I actually generally like this itinerary. I don't love that we have to stop in Victoria. This one ranked number 5 overall. I'm giving it a number 3 ranking of the best, and you'll see why in just a second. This one departs out of Vancouver on April 29th and arrives in Seattle. It is a one-time sailing with a Clint's Cruisability score of 22.44. It's not bad. I would sail this one. It's a little early in the season though, just be aware of that. But I think it's better to sail earlier in the Alaska season than later in the Alaska season, as the weather starts to turn in the end of August, late August, early September. So just be aware of that. We'll move on with number 2, the Alaska Adventure on Ovation of the Seas. This one is this one is another one-way sailing. Yeah, this is another one-way sailing that leaves from Vancouver, spends a day cruising, visits Sitka, Juneau, Skagway, Endicott Arm and Dawes Glacier, sounding pretty familiar, cruises to Ketchikan, spend a day cruising, and you end up back in Seattle. What you'll notice about this one is, because you start in Vancouver, you are not visiting Victoria, which is exactly how it should be, right? Like that just makes sense to me. I don't understand. I don't understand the previous itinerary. Still good. This one's better. So this is the reason I like this one is that it's actually an 8-day itinerary. We have an extra stop in there. I mean, if you're gonna go for 7, why not go for 8, right? Get that extra port visit. I like that idea. This one leaves on May 9th, so that's coming up. May 9th is a little early in the season, but I don't think it's too early in the season. I think you're gonna have a great time on this one. And the prices are reflected on it being a little early too, which is good. This one gets a Clint's Cruisability score of 23.31 and is ranked number 2 overall. Okay, so we have some honorable mentions, and these were ranked number 4 and 5. If you've been kind of counting, it's like, wait, he started with number 5, but it was ranked number 7, then he went to number 4, it was ranked number 6. Okay, these are actually honorable mentions. It's the north and southbound and Hubbard Glacier itineraries on Radiance of the Seas. These are one-way cruises that either leave from Seward and end up in Vancouver or leave from Vancouver and end up in Seward, Alaska. One-way cruises this way are great because you don't have that extra time coming back. You typically get to visit more of Alaska, which is fantastic. So we'll start going to Alaska on the northbound cruises, and these leave from Vancouver. You'll cruise the Inside Passage, wonderful. Then hit Juneau, Icy Strait Point, Sitka. I personally like Sitka. It's got that small town feel. You're also on a smaller ship, so you're not getting off the ship with 6,000 people on Radiance of the Seas. It's a smaller ship, which is nice. Then you're going to visit Skagway, then Hubbard, and you're going to end up in Hubbard Glacier. Excuse me. Visit Hubbard Glacier, and then you're going to end up in Seward, Alaska, where you can get off the ship and maybe go on a land tour. Go up and visit Denali, go up to Fairbanks, or head out back home from Anchorage. Nice itineraries. These leave May 3rd, May 17th and 31st, or June 14th, or July 12th, or August 9th, or August 23rd. A lot of options there. There's actually 10 sailings. This one gets a Clint's Cruisability score of 23.11. Really solid. The southbound, almost identical scores. This one visits Seward, starts in Seward, so maybe you start with a land tour first if you want. Fly up to Fairbanks, take the train down to Anchorage, all the way down to Seward. What an amazing trip that would be. Leave Seward, visit Hubbard Glacier, then go to Juneau, Skagway, Icy Strait Point, and then instead of visiting Sitka, you go to Ketchikan, which is a fun, albeit a bit more touristy stop. There's some really interesting things to do in Ketchikan. Then you're gonna cruise that peaceful Inside Passage as you make your way back to Vancouver. This one sails May 10th, June 7th, July 5th, or August 2nd. All of those would be really nice sailings. And this one gets a cleanse cruisability score of 23.81. That's 7/10 of a score higher of a point. So not even a full point better. That's just with Ketchikan, there's a little bit more to do, so it gets a little bit higher score there. However, personally, I like Sitka better. So some pretty nice options and a good honorable mention, coming in ranked at 5th and 4th respectively. The next honorable mention is a bit different. So far, you've seen that if an itinerary visits a glacier, we had one in there that didn't, they only visit one glacier. This one, the Alaska Inside Passage on Brilliance of the Seas that sails July 7th, August 4th, or September 1st, is the only itinerary that visits 2 glaciers. You leave from Vancouver, cruise the Inside Passage, very nice. Visit Sitka, then you go to you have a scenic cruising in Tracy Arm Fjord, which is really nice. Cruise to Juneau, and then you visit Hubbard Glacier, which is great. Then you cruise to Ketchikan, and then you have a very nice cruise back through the Inside Passage back to Vancouver. Love it. But because there aren't as many stops on this one, it does take a hit. However, if you really want to be on Royal Caribbean, and you really want to get as much glacier experience as possible in 7 days, this is the cruise for you. It's an honorable mention. It technically is ranked number 14th of the 28 itineraries. It gets a cleanse cruisability score of 18.64. I absolutely would cruise this one. Having been to Alaska before, I love the glaciers and I love that peaceful cruising on Inside Passage. Very nice. Very nice option here. Even though it kind of scores a little down, I wanted to mention it because I think it deserves to be mentioned. And finally, number 1. The number 1 itinerary is the 7-night southbound Alaska and Hubbard Glacier cruise. I'm going to give you the dates in a second. This one visits Seward, Hubbard Glacier, Juneau, Skagway with a 5 p.m. departure, and then makes its way over to Haines. So you get an extra stop on the same day, but you get an extra stop. This is in the middle of summer in Alaska, so you have a late sunset, so you'll be just fine. You have plenty of stuff to do in Haines. Even though you're arriving at 7 p.m., sun doesn't set until like 11. So you got plenty of time to visit the town there, which is wonderful. I love that. Then you go to Icy Strait Point, Ketchikan, then Inside Passage coming back to Vancouver. So it's a one-way. You get a ton of Alaska on this one. This one departs May 24th, June 21st, July 19th, August 16th, August 30th, and September 13th. And is an incredible itinerary. It doesn't matter the cruise line. I love this itinerary. I would be on this one in a heartbeat if we weren't going to be in Iceland during these cruises. We'll be cruising to Iceland. I'll give you that update later on this season. This one gets a cleanse cruisability score of 25.53, and I love it. It's the winner. It is hands down the best Royal Caribbean itinerary out there. You have 6 sailing options. Get on it, get it booked. If you've got the time in one of those, if you got a week off for one of those, go do it. Don't miss your chance. Looks amazing. Thank you so much for hanging with me for this 5-part series on Royal Caribbean's Alaska 2024 season. Really enjoyed putting this together for you. Let me know, are you sailing to Alaska on Royal Caribbean this year? I've had some people let me know that they are doing Alaska, but they're not doing it on Royal Caribbean. I want to know if you're on one of these cruises. Let me know what you think, and then definitely let me know how it was. I want to hear from you. Thanks so much for liking the video, subscribing, and tuning in. We'll see you next time.